Joe Kovac from the 603 Alliance. And can you tell us a little bit more about the 603 Alliance before we get into our other subject on the climate control?
Sure. So the 603 Alliance is a grassroots organization based here in New Hampshire. We are an all-volunteer organization, and our mission is to restore constitutional principles at all levels of government. So that's a very big picture mission. The way we have lived out that mission over the past couple of years has been primarily to work on getting people elected to state representative who believe in freedom and limited government. We also have held a number of events. We held, going back to our beginnings in 2015, we held a grassroots caucus to try to focus support for a conservative candidate for the New Hampshire primary. We've held an inaugural ball for Donald Trump here in New Hampshire, raised about $5,000 for the Liberty House in Manchester, which helps homeless veterans get back on their feet. We've held a couple of events. In April, for example, we held an event we called Liberty Trumps Socialism, in which we invited a number of speakers, many nationally known speakers and state-level speakers, to come in and talk about issues ranging from taxes and the economy to illegal immigration, the Green New Deal. So it was an all-day event followed by a dinner where we had James O'Keefe from Project Veritas as our keynote speaker. And that was especially interesting because the week prior to that, James O'Keefe had been subpoenaed by the Attorney General here in New Hampshire.
Good timing.
Regarding an issue with voter fraud that he was working on exposing.
So, you're doing this all with volunteer help and stuff like that? And
we are.
Are you the person to contact if somebody wants to help you?
Well, if somebody's interested in finding out more, the best place to go is to our website, 603alliance.org. And we also have a Facebook page. We post materials to there. We just posted a video last week on the income tax, which most people don't know that our legislature passed an income tax this year. Fortunately, our Governor Sununu, vetoed that. We're very happy that he was there to stand in the way of making that law. But these are the kinds of things that we try to educate people about and expose. So 603alliance.org, people can go there, they can sign up for our email, they can send us their contact information if they're interested in volunteering for one of our events or just otherwise getting involved or running for state representative, because that's another thing that we've done a lot of work on, is recruiting and training and supporting candidates for state rep.
We need more people going out, making sure we can get back to a more conservative type of government, and we don't have to face some of this potential legislation that really would have hurt New Hampshire. I don't know how people feel about that, really. They should be getting active and helping out. But let's talk about the climate control event that you're having later this month.
So on July 29th, we're going to be hosting an event that we call Climate Change, Challenges and Solutions. And this will be held at St. Anselm College at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, which is a frequent stop for a lot of candidates and public figures. So we rented that space and we decided to hold a debate on climate change, because we feel like people often hear about climate change as if it is a done deal. There's nothing else to be discussed. In fact, Gary Hirshberg, who's the founder of Stonyfield Yogurt, recently put out a press release that he was going to be organizing a series of public forums, town halls for the Democrat presidential candidates about climate change. And while I think it's always useful, more information is better, more discussion is a good thing, I question whether those will truly be open debates. We wanted to hear both sides of the issues. So we actually began by inviting the Democrat presidential candidates. Everybody polling at 1% or higher was invited to come participate in this event. We're not too surprised that none of them decided to take us up on the invitation. So we will be having a few people representing each side of the issue. So those who believe that climate change is real and is man-made and that we need to do something about it, as well as what I'll call climate skeptics, people who think that it's either not real or that it's exaggerated or that the proposed solutions are probably going to cause more pain than any potential changes that are coming.
Well, I think the change word seems to be so definitive as change for the worse. But we've had changes throughout our lifetime, back and forth, both ways. And I don't know how people don't take that into account.
Well, it's interesting because I read an article recently going back to that quoted some people from the 1980s saying that by the year 2000, New York would be below sea level and that we had all kinds of horrible things coming our way. I'm open to hearing the facts, but so far I think that there's been a reluctance to debate those facts. So we do have a couple of confirmed speakers on, again, what I would call the climate skeptic side. One of those is Christopher Lord Monckton, who is a member of the UK Independence Party. He's a British politician who has written on climate change, has spoken extensively on climate change, and is very knowledgeable about the topic. The other confirmed speaker we have on that side is a gentleman named Joe Bastardi. I grew up in the New York area, and I grew up listening to Joe Bastardi on AccuWeather. He was the chief long-term forecaster for AccuWeather for years, and he's now with a company called Weatherbell Analytics, and he is one of their chief long-term forecasters there as well. So we've got two people who are ready, willing, and able to show up and have an honest conversation about it. And we really would like to, as I said, we want to see a balanced view. We want to bring people in who are going to represent the other side, and a moderator who will deal evenly and fairly with both sides.
Well, that's something that's quite interesting. But you haven't been able to get the former head of Sunnyfield or whatever it was?
Well, we've only just reached out to him because
see.
as I said, we invited the Democrat candidates. We wanted to give them ample time to make a decision. So we gave them until Friday of last week to give us a firm decision on their participation. So we extended that invitation, and now that that's come and gone, we're going to move to finding some other people that we think will be able to adequately represent that point of view.
Okay, I can recommend the Heartland Institute that's in Chicago and comes out with a environment and climate newspaper once a month, and each of the legislators in New Hampshire get one of these copies. Why they don't talk about it more, I don't know, but it's very informative, and you might have a couple of people from that institute who holds an annual convention the same way the people who are worried about the contribution of people to the cause of climate change, which I think is, is too serious way of painting it. You want to look at it, but you want to know what's happening. You're not sure what's happening, and how can it happen? What has changed? Have you had any personal involvement with some of those discussions? I mean,
I haven't been. I try to follow them, and so my biggest concern has been that there is this attitude that it's settled science.
Yeah,
settled science is the phrase that they use, and I've heard more than one scientist point out that there is no such thing as settled science. It's if you think that you have if you think that you've discovered the truth and that it will that will never change, you may be open to surprises down the road. So I think there needs to be a debate. There's been considerable controversy around some of the data that was put out by some of these climate change the proponents of the theory of man-made climate change. And I'm concerned about some of the proposed solutions because there's talk of spending trillions and trillions of dollars and making changes, some of which may not even be realistic.
Right.
So I think it's reasonable that we should be working on diversifying our sources of energy. I think it's reasonable and prudent to look at solar and to continue to continue to improve the technologies around solar and wind power and other renewable sources. But the reality is that we are far from ever implementing those in a way that they're going to put a huge dent in our energy consumption, and they may never put a huge dent in our energy consumption. So I think we need to approach that realistically, and we need to look at the effects that that's going to have on our economy. And there are people who are struggling paycheck to paycheck. If we make changes that are detrimental to our economy, that affects everybody, and most of all, it affects those who are really struggling. So
That's
those
right.
are some things that we need to be thinking about as we move forward with that discussion.
I think you're very right on that, and I think one of the things that people picked on is they saw something happening that they didn't really think was normal, and they really had no understanding about what's causing some of these effects. And the technical explanation of it was never clear for the, I don't want to say uninformed, but the ones who didn't understand that type of science, because they just made money. They threw money at what they considered as a big problem, and that'll bring anybody up who has good intentions or bad intentions to grab that money and start writing papers about whatever they want to say, rather
Well,
than what they really found out.
You look back at the Solyndra scandal a few years ago, that was a perfect example of what I would call crony capitalism or
Right.
cronyism, where a company that was making solar energy technology got a huge amount of money from taxpayer dollars, or guaranteed by us taxpayers, went out of business and left taxpayers with the bill. So I think it's an invitation to corruption. It's an invitation to misuse. I think the free market has a very good way of solving problems, finding the right way to invest in ways that will ultimately produce value.
Yeah, I was looking at some of those papers. As I said, I looked at that Environmental and Climate News. They brought up several examples of very poor scientific analysis of the work, where people were doing measurements like on tenths of a degree in temperature. Well, they never put an error limit on that measurement of that on their papers, that they just was taking raw data and feeding it in. And tenth of a degree isn't very much change. It's kind of hard, and your environment will change day to day if you're taking it measurements like that.
Well, it's interesting because I think there are a lot of people who have come to a conclusion and they're looking for the data to back it up.
That's right.
And this is unfortunate. It's a human weakness that we all tend to do that in some ways at some times. But I recall a conversation I had a couple of years ago with a gentleman who was running for state representative, a Democrat, and he was a former high school science teacher. He told me that global warming was one of the big issues of our time and really needed to be addressed. And he cited as a data point that there was a ship that had recently made a trip through the Northwest Passage, and he said it's never been done before. Well, I really didn't have any rebuttal for him because I wasn't familiar with that and I didn't know if it had ever been done before. So I went and I looked it up. And it turns out that it had been done on a number of occasions before. This was not a particularly new situation. It isn't done on a regular basis because it's not really commercially viable. But I think there are a lot of people who are willing to look at facts very selectively. And I think it's important that we discipline ourselves to look at the information, collect the information first, then come to conclusions. And I think that the climate debate is one area where we really need to encourage people to do that. So we're hoping that this event will provide that opportunity. We're hoping that we get people from across the spectrum, whatever you may believe, come to the event, hear what they have to say, and then draw your conclusions from that.
There's going to be a question and answer type of audience, or how are you
We
going to do
don't
that?
know if we will be able to open it up to a complete question and answer, sort of open question kind of a scenario. I think it's more likely that we will collect questions and allow the moderator to
choose,
select
yeah.
questions and read those to
I'm
the
sure that moderator would
speakers.
be able to pick out some of the key ones. That would be
Right.
good. It'd be interesting to see how many people attend that. I hope you're doing a publicity on this. How do people have to sign up for
We
it?
we have a capacity of about 160 people
Right.
there.
It's a nice location, though.
It is a good location. It's open to the press, so we're hoping that we have some people there. Some press will show up, and it's a free event, so it doesn't cost anything to come to it. If people want to find out more, they can go to our website, 603alliance.org, and there's information there. We ask that you reserve a ticket in advance. That way,
Okay.
you don't have to worry about whether there are enough seats available. You'll have your tickets.
That's what I was just going to ask.
But it's a free event. It's taking place on Monday, July 29th. So it's a Monday evening at 7 o'clock. We expect it to go probably till about 8:30 or so.
Okay. That sounds good. And is that the format that you normally have? On
This
some of these
this
things?
is new for us.
Oh,
So
okay.
we've done events where we had a number of speakers speaking all day. We've had, as I said, an inaugural ball,
Right.
dinner events. We've done candidate trainings. We've done all kinds of events. We've never done this debate format before, so this will be a
Okay.
first.
Well, that's good. You plan if it goes over well, do you plan on using that mechanism for future
I think there's a good
controversial
chance
agents?
that I think there's a good chance that we
Because it
could.
sounds good. If we can get a pro and con type of discussion going, people will get to understand a little bit more broadly, because what we see on television is so one-sided.
Right.
I don't know why people don't question that a little bit more. It seems just that there must be somebody out there that has a different viewpoint.
Well, there's a lot of messages coming from a lot of people that, it's settled science and there is no more debate to be had.
Yeah.
As I said, this is our attempt to say, then let's, then come to the table and talk about it, because I think there is
There are
further
questions.
discussion to be
Yeah.
had.
Yeah. Well, it's a very valuable thing you're doing. And you said you had other programs, though, you had in the future.
Right. Well, we have the 2020 elections approaching, and we believe that that's going to be a really, really critical year. Obviously, being a presidential election year, we expect there will be pretty high turnout, voter turnout for that. But many people are not aware that New Hampshire really has a citizen legislature. We have, with 400 House seats. It's, I believe, the second largest legislature in the English-speaking world. And what that means is that the people who go up to Concord and make our laws are regular folks. They're people who live down the street from you. They're not in it for the money. They're not getting rich.
Well,
You know yourself, you can make $100 a year as a state rep. I think that's great.
plus mileage.
plus mileage and a license plate, right? So it's a true citizen legislature.
Right.
But what that means is that because districts are relatively small,
Right.
and the average state rep is representing, I think, about 3,500 people. It's a
right.
small number. It can be a struggle to find people who are willing to do that, to do what is essentially a volunteer position. What it means is that the people who run for state rep are typically people who are very committed and believe that it's important that we create good policy. And I'm talking about people on both sides of the fence politically. They're there because they care. And so we're looking for people who believe in limited government, that believe that less government tends to stimulate more innovation and freedom and economic
More
prosperity.
people choice. type of things.
Exactly. And we've seen a lot of legislation come through now that we have a strong Democrat majority in the legislature. We've seen a lot of legislation come through that we think is pretty extreme. And there's a lot of things that I would say are sort of control freak kind of legislation. You know, you can't have plastic straws or you can't
Yeah.
have plastic bags, and we want to license people to do these various jobs that really don't require
Oh, license, yeah.
special skills necessarily. There's, you know, there's a tax on canoes. There's business taxes, as you know, the income tax that was passed and vetoed. So there's a lot that we think, you know, we believe that limited government is the better way. So
So
we're
you're-
looking to recruit people
Okay.
to run.
Okay.
We have training programs because a lot of people who have run, they've never run before. They've never run for anything. They don't know the first thing about how do I get started? How do I raise money? How do I get the word out? What
Right.
do I need to do?
All those things.
And so we run, initially we run some information sessions so that candidates can learn more about what it takes to run, what's the time commitment, how much money am I going to have to raise, what resources are available to help me. Then we run 2-day candidate schools that I think last time we did 3 of these. We trained about 80 candidates. And that covers soup to nuts, everything you need to know to run a campaign
Yeah,
for
I've been
state
to
rep.
one of them before, and I think you did a very good job on that.
And then the third thing that we have done is what we call our issues briefing. And that's where very often people will be running for state rep and they don't necessarily know, they may know where they stand on an issue. For example, they may be supportive of the Second Amendment, but they don't necessarily know some of the intricacies of legislation that was proposed, may have been passed, may have been defeated, but what are some of the intricacies of the legislation around that issue? And so when they go knocking on doors and they're talking to people out on the street about their candidacy and they have somebody ask them about the Second Amendment, that they're able to really talk about those issues in a substantive way. So we run those issues briefings and then we do other support services throughout the process. So we don't charge candidates for that. That's our mission. That's what we do to try to create better government.
So that will start beginning of next year, or
We are talking now to candidates or potential candidates for state rep. And we're working with other organizations. We don't want to work in a silo. We want to work with other organizations around the state to make that a reality. So we know that there are others who are recruiting candidates. We'll work with them so that we can be working together, not stepping on each other's toes in the process. And then the training will really start in earnest early next year. Yes.
and is there follow up with that? I mean, have you actually gone around with people, or how does that? You know, you tell them what they have to do. Do you help evaluate how well they're doing in that?
We do to some extent. There's it's tough with that many candidates.
Well,
In
yeah.
a few cases, we were assigning somebody a mentor or a campaign coach who would
Okay,
work with them
that's
throughout
what
the
I was-
process.
yeah.
We also held regular conference calls with candidates. So as new issues came up, as something made the news that might come up on the campaign
Yeah.
trail, we would update them about that, talk to them about that, give them a little bit of a sort of a mini lesson in these periodic conference calls.
I've gone to, I guess the ones that you started way in the beginning, because I had 4 terms there. But the one thing I felt was lacking was you needed to sort of do a dry run on that to give people, people listening to you, but do they really understand what you said on how to do it? And just running an example, maybe just play acting or something like that.
We've done a little bit of that.
Okay.
And the other thing that we find is that throughout this process, we had people who came to more than one of our campaign schools and then came to the issues briefings. And so what we found is that in 2018 in particular, we really ended up building a sense of community, that people got to know each other. And so I think something that was lacking in the past was this people from Cheshire County meeting people from Rockingham County, meeting people from Coas County, all of these people kind of coming together and getting to know each other a little bit
camaraderie.
early in
Yeah.
the process, so that when they get to Concord, that they
It's a good
already
idea.
see some familiar faces.
Yeah, I mean, that builds, confidence in them too. They know what other people are thinking, and
Absolutely.
they learn from one another. I think that's a great idea. So well, hopefully you'll be more successful. I've been hearing that there's a lot of people that didn't vote in the last election, and that was one of the reasons that we changed the plurality up there.
Yes.
You agree with that, or?
I think we lost. I think there were a lot of people who came out in 2016 because it was Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, and there were a lot of those Trump voters who maybe don't vote every time who stayed home in 2018, and I think that's unfortunate.
And besides that, I think there are people who are really given up on voting. They never think that their vote makes a difference, and there are people that just don't vote anymore. Now I was just wondering if you heard that.
I do believe that there are people like that, but let me tell you a story. I've run for office 3 times now. In 2016, I lost by a single vote.
Oh,
now,
no
this was a
kidding.
flotarial district, 10 towns, so a very large district,
yeah.
about 15,000 registered voters. I lost by a single vote. So to anybody who believes that your vote doesn't count,
Yeah.
there's proof that it does.
Well, I think that's another reason to have good laws of who votes and who doesn't vote.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Exciting programs there. I hope you get a good crowd, and please come back again and tell us how everything's going.
Will do. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much.